All right. So now we're going to start talking about the scope of a variable. Now, what is the scope of a variable? Well, when I say scope of a variable, it means how much it covers, or more accurately, how much it can be used. So basically, this is kind of like boxes. If the variable is outside the box, then it can be accessible. I mean, if the variable is like out of your front yard, I mean, okay, for example, what if there was a ball out in your front yard? It's accessible anywhere. So that is called a global variable. That ball, that's a representation of how a global variable works. Next, the room. A ball in a room is often called uh this is often called a this is often called a local scope. This is declared inside a function, meaning that if the function if the function is the room, then the variable in the function is the ball. Or with my analogy, the ball is in the room and it can only be accessed in the room. Finally, we have block scope. Variables declared inside a block, like loops or if statements, may have block scope depending on the programming language. If it's JavaScript, it'd be if open parenthesis true closing parenthesis, then open curly braces, let x equals 10 semicolon console.log open parenthesis x closing parenthesis semicolon, and then new line closing parenthesis, then at the end of that console.log open parenthesis x closing parenthesis semicolon. The scope rules in different languages is that there's a lot of programming languages out there. So basically, global variables can be accessed from any function. To modify a global variable inside a function, use the global keyword. Variables declared inside a function are local to that function. Python has a limited block scope, only in certain cases like list comprehensions. Now, let's actually get to our examples. So first, go to VS Code or whatever. Go to VS Code or whatever IDE you're using. Click on New File. Click on File. Then click on File. Then in the drop-down menu, you can see New File. Then, if you already have the Python extension installed, which is this, and you can also find the extensions here, then you can click the Python, and then good. Now we're going to do that. Python file, close that, and then alright, save your work, name it, scope, click save, and then we're gonna do it. First, we're gonna start with a global variable. A global variable is a variable like I said, which has accessibility anywhere. For example, for greeting hello world. Alright, we have that. Save. So this is a global variable. Using the global keyword, you can actually modify a global variable. Next, we're gonna use it. Def greeting now we're going to do then this. We're gonna call the function. Okay, select Python debugger, Python file. See? Now this is function greeting at this is the location code. However, if I were to why is it like that? Because that's because it actually searched for the thing. So we're gonna delete that and then let's try and run it again. You still get the same thing. That's because that's in the Python debug console. This is the PowerShell. Let's run it. Still that. However, what if I were to do this? Greet. Well, here's the problem. This is matching this. So what if I were to type greet? Alright, let's try it again. See, it worked. Now what's the problem? Greet 6 is not defined. Let's try it again. Hello world. That's because the greeting thought it was a variable. It wasn't a variable. It was supposed to be a function. However, the variable this had already taken it up. So it ended up looking like the last one, the function at the location code. Now let's try a local scope. This is even crazier. First we're gonna delete this since I don't need duplicates. And then let's start. Def scream this screaming lol. Print screaming. However, if I tried using screaming here, it says not defined. Let's try this. Now, what if I try using that? Well, here's the kicker. That local scope, it's pretty much really hard to use because you can still extract the variable from it. So it ends up giving both this and this. Finally, we're gonna do the block scope. Unfortunately, the block scope is pretty hard. It's harder. However, variables declared inside a block may have block scope. Alright, let's try doing block scope. Def check if messy. Okay, we're gonna do this. Answer input is the room messy? if answer equals yes, then punishment, no video games for a week. Print punishment. So this is block scope. It didn't run because I didn't call the function. Let's go. Is the room messy? No. Nothing. It feels like this. Else. We're going to print. You can play your video games. Is the room messy? Yes. No video games for a week. What if it was no? You can play your video games. Anyway, it's uncommon to see variables set inside an if statement, and the reason is most people tend to put variables outside the if statement. For example, hold on, I'll just show you. This is a global variable, or more like a global list. And then, here, this is the global variable. I mean, everything in here is a global variable, actually. Hold on, let me search up another example. Let's try. All right, much better. This is the global variable. This is the block scope. And then where can we find it? Okay, there's no local variable in here, but still there's actually a lot of block and global variables in here. For example, the table number. Anyway, that's it for our episode on variable scope, and I'll see you in the next video.